Know the difference between a slow leak and a burst pipe. Spent 38 years in construction, built things meant to last. Houses, commercial buildings, a shopping center outside of Knoxville that's still standing. I know when something's been patched over instead of fixed. I know when the foundation has been quietly rotting while the paint stays fresh. I just didn't want to know it about my own family. My wife and I got married young. 22 years old, she was working at a diner on Route 9. And I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. We had our daughter 2 years later. Built our first house with my own hands on a half-acre lot outside of Chattanooga. 40 years. We built something together, or I thought we did. Our daughter, she's 34 now, married a man I'll call my son-in-law, because that's all he ever really was to me. A title. A role on paper. He came from money that had already run out, which meant he came from the idea of money, which is a different thing entirely, and a more dangerous one. He had the confidence of a man who's never been told no, and the work ethic of a man who's never had to be told yes. He talked about investments, opportunities, deals. In 11 years of marriage to my daughter, I never once saw him close one. What I did see was my daughter change. Not all at once. That's never how it happens. It was slow, the way erosion is slow. You don't notice the riverbank moving until one morning you look out, and the water is 6 feet closer to your house. She stopped calling unless she needed something. My wife started making excuses for her. She's busy, you know how it is. They have a lot going on. I didn't push back. A man my age, you learn to pick your battles. I kept working, kept paying, kept showing up. That's what I'd always done. The financial stuff started about 4 years ago. My son-in-law had a deal that needed seed money, $80,000. My wife was convinced. I signed the check because she asked me to, and because my daughter looked at me with those eyes she's had since she was 6 years old, and I could never say no to them. The deal collapsed within a year. No explanation, no apology, a lot of words that didn't mean anything. Then there was the car. Then there was the roof on their house. Then there was the thing with the business license I still don't fully understand. Each time my wife would say, "They're family. What are we supposed to do? Let them drown." And each time I'd write the check. And each time the water level in our account dropped a little lower. I told myself I was being a good father. I told myself that's what you do. I should have paid more attention to what they were doing when they thought I wasn't watching. The night everything changed, I was out in my workshop behind the house. I'd been having some tightness in my chest on and off for a few weeks. I chalked it up to stress, to the August heat, to getting older. I was 63. Things hurt at 63. You push through. It wasn't stress. I remember the moment clearly. I was sanding down a cabinet door, and something hit me in the chest like I'd walked into a steel beam. Not a sharp pain. Something crushing, like the air in the room had turned solid and pressed itself against my sternum. I grabbed the workbench. My arm went numb to the elbow. I knew what it was. I'd seen my father go through it 20 years ago. I knew exactly what was happening. I made it to the house. My wife wasn't there. I called her cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called her daughter. Same thing. I called my wife again. This time she picked up. "I'm having a heart attack," I said. I wasn't being dramatic. My voice was steady. I remember being surprised by how steady it was. She said, "What?" I said, "I need you to call 911. I'm at the house." There was noise in the background. Music, voices, glasses clinking. She said, "We're in the middle of dinner. Are you sure you're not just—" "Call 911, I said. "Right now." She said she would. I hung up and called 911 myself, because 63 years on this earth had taught me not to wait on someone else to do the thing that needed doing. The paramedics got there in 8 minutes. I was on the kitchen floor by then, back against the cabinets, trying to breathe slow and shallow the way you do, when you know that panicking will make it worse. They got me on the stretcher and into the ambulance, and I remember thinking, someone will be at the hospital when I get there. Of course, someone will be there. No one was there. I was in surgery for 4 hours. When I came out, I was in the cardiac ICU and the room was quiet, and the chair beside my bed was empty. A nurse I'll call my night nurse. A woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the kind of calm that only comes from decades of doing hard work. She checked my vitals and asked if there was anyone she should call. I gave her my wife's number. She stepped out. When she came back, her face was careful, professional. But I've been reading faces for 63 years. She said she'd come by tomorrow morning, my night nurse told me. She said it was late. It was 11:47 p.m. I'd had open heart surgery. I was 63 years old, alone in a hospital room, and my wife of 40 years said it was too late to come. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I lay there in that bed with the machines beeping and the IV in my arm, and I didn't feel sad. I felt something shift, the way you feel a foundation shift under your feet, that low, slow, internal adjustment that tells you the structure you thought was solid has been hollow for a long time. You didn't cause it. You just finally felt it. In the morning, my son-in-law's birthday party. That's what dinner had been, apparently, at a restaurant 45 minutes from our house, had wrapped up, and my wife came to the hospital at 10 a.m., looking fresh and rested, wearing a blouse I'd bought her for her birthday last year. She kissed me on the forehead and said, "You gave us quite a scare." Us. My daughter came in behind her. She said, "The doctor said you're going to be fine." She said it like that was the end of the conversation. My son-in-law sent a text, not a call. A text. It said, "Glad you're doing better, tough old bird," with a laughing emoji. I lay in that hospital bed for 9 days. My wife came every other day, usually in the afternoon, usually for about an hour. My daughter came twice. My son-in-law didn't come at all. I had a lot of time to think. Here is what I thought about. I thought about the $80,000. I thought about the car and the roof and the business license. I thought about the 40 years. I thought about what my daughter had said to me at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when she'd had too much wine and she'd gotten impatient with something I'd said, and she told me, not meanly, which was almost worse, "Dad, you really don't understand money as well as you think you do." I thought about my wife telling the doctor not to call again after midnight. My night nurse had told me quietly on my 3rd day that my wife had said it on the first night, that the calls were unnecessary after a certain hour and that she needed her sleep. I was in the ICU. She needed her sleep. By day 5, I had stopped feeling the weight of it and started feeling something else. Something quieter and more purposeful. The way a job site goes quiet in the morning before the crew arrives, and everything is still and you can see clearly what needs to be done. I had a very good attorney. Had used him for contracts for 20 years. His name isn't important. What's important is that he answered my call on day 6, came to the hospital on day 7, and we talked for 3 hours. I want to be careful here about what I say, because it's all done now and the legal side of things is finished. But I'll say this. When you spend 40 years building something, a business, a portfolio, a financial life, and you've been the one doing the building, you have more options than people assume. Property that was mine before the marriage. Accounts structured in ways that had always been practical but now became strategic. A will that I had not updated in 11 years and that, upon reflection, no longer reflected my wishes. I also made some calls to my accountant, and to my financial advisor, and to a real estate attorney in addition to my contracts attorney. By the time I was discharged, 9 days after I'd been alone on my kitchen floor thinking I might die there, I had been quietly, methodically, and completely thorough. I did not go back home. I had a friend, a man I'd worked with for 20 years. Good man, trustworthy, the kind of person who shows up when things are bad. And I'd called him from the hospital on day 8. He picked me up at discharge. I had a bag that my night nurse had helped me arrange to be brought from home by a neighbor I'd trusted for 15 years. I had my documents, my laptop, my medications, and the dog, who my friend had picked up from the house the day before. My wife didn't know I wasn't coming home until she arrived at the house that afternoon. She called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go too. Then she called from my daughter's phone, and I let that one go. Then my son-in-law called from a number I didn't recognize. I don't know how he thought I wouldn't see it was him, and I declined it. She left a voicemail saying she was confused and scared, and where was I? I sent one text. It said, "I'm fine. I'll be in touch through my attorney." I've thought a lot about whether that was cruel, about whether I owed more than that. After 40 years, I've sat with it. My conclusion is this. I sent 911. She didn't. I gave everything for 4 decades. The kitchen floor was my answer about what that was worth to them. I didn't know an explanation to people who didn't drive 45 minutes when I was in surgery. What happened over the next 2 months was not dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no confrontations. My attorney handled everything, calmly and professionally, and what emerged was an accounting of 40 years that made things very clear. The house, the one I'd built in that half-acre lot in Chattanooga, had my name on the deed. The business accounts had my name. The investments I'd made in the years before we were married and continued under my name had my name. The money I'd given to my son-in-law over the years was documented as loans, because I'd been careful about that. Because 38 years in construction teaches you to document everything. My wife's attorney called mine and used words like shock and devastation and the contribution she made to the marriage. Her contributions were real. I'm not dismissing them, but I had also spent 40 years watching what those contributions looked like when I was on the cardiac ICU floor, and I had my answer. The divorce took 7 months. It was not pleasant. There were accusations, there was crying, there was a period in which my daughter didn't speak to me, which I found I could bear more easily than I expected, which told me something about how much of our relationship had been real. My son-in-law, it emerged during the financial disclosure process, had been borrowing against a joint account my daughter held, one I'd funded as a gift years ago, without her knowledge, or so she claimed. That became their problem, not mine. He tried, at one point, to suggest that I was mentally diminished from the heart attack and the medications. His own attorney, apparently, advised him strongly against pursuing that. Men who've spent 4 decades running a construction business and who can produce 11 years of clean financial records tend to look fairly undiminished when the paperwork is laid out. I want to tell you about the moment I think about most now. It was a Tuesday in October, about 6 weeks after I'd left. I was at my friend's place, sitting on his back porch with a cup of coffee, watching his yellow lab chase squirrels around the yard. It was early, before 7. Cool. The kind of October morning that smells like wet leaves and wood smoke. My dog was asleep under my chair. My phone buzzed. It was my daughter. I looked at it for a long time. The dog lifted her head and looked at me, then put her head back down, which felt like good advice. I didn't answer, not because I didn't love her. I've loved her since she was born, and I'll love her until I'm not here anymore. But love isn't the same thing as permission. Love doesn't mean unlimited access to a man who was on his kitchen floor while you were raising a glass at a restaurant 45 minutes away. She left a voicemail. I listened to it that night. She was crying. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood how serious it was, which may even be true. She said she missed me and wanted to talk. I didn't call back. Not that night. What I've learned at 63 years old, after open-heart surgery, after 40 years of building things for other people to live in, is this. The structure either holds or it doesn't. You can patch a crack, but you can't patch a foundation. And once you know what something is really made of, once you've seen what it does under pressure, in an emergency, when the cost of showing up is missing a party, you can't unknow it. I live in a smaller house now. I bought it 6 months after the divorce was final. A ranch-style place on 2 acres outside of Maryville, good bones, needed some work, which suited me fine. I put in new floors myself, fixed the drainage on the south side, built a workshop in the back, bigger than the old one. My dog follows me everywhere. My friend comes over most Sundays. I have my health, which the doctors tell me is good. Better, actually, than before the surgery. Because now I eat right and I sleep 8 hours, and my blood pressure is the best it's been in 15 years. My daughter and I talk now, occasionally. It's careful the way things are when you're rebuilding on uncertain ground. She left him, eventually, my son-in-law, about a year after the divorce. I didn't say I told you so. That felt unnecessary. My ex-wife, I heard through mutual friends, is renting an apartment on the east side of Chattanooga. I don't wish her badly. I genuinely don't. But I also don't wish her a single dollar of mine. And those two things can be true at the same time. Here's what I know. I built things my whole life, houses that are still standing, a business that ran clean for nearly 4 decades, a family that I thought was solid and turned out to have been, not a lie. Exactly. But something less than I'd believe it was. I almost died on a kitchen floor, and the people I'd spent my life building things for were 45 minutes away, glasses raised, music playing, celebrating a man who'd never built a single thing in his life. I got back up off that floor, same as I always have. The difference is this time, I got up and I walked out, and I didn't look back, except when I chose to, on my own terms, in my own time. That's the only kind of second chance worth having. I think about that kitchen floor a lot. Not with bitterness, I'm past that. But the way you think about a moment that split your life cleanly into before and after. I was 63 years old, alone, back against the cabinets. And the people I'd spent 4 decades building a life for were 45 minutes away raising a glass. That's not bad luck. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a result. And results don't lie. Here's what I've come to believe. The way people behave in a crisis is not an accident. It's not a bad day or a poor decision made in a moment of confusion. It's the truest thing you'll ever see about them. You can spend years watching someone's carefully managed version of themselves, the version that shows up for birthdays and holidays and the easy moments, and never really know what they're made of. Then something goes wrong, something real, and in about 30 seconds, you find out everything you needed to know and didn't. My wife made a choice that night. So did my daughter. And what I had to accept, sitting in that ICU bed with 9 days to think, was that those choices didn't come from nowhere. I had been watching the foundation crack for years, and I kept patching it because I didn't want to know what was underneath. That's not love. That's avoidance. And avoidance has a cost, and eventually it comes due. What got me off that floor, literally and then later in every other sense, was not anger. Anger burns hot and then it burns out and you're left cold and spent. What got me up was something quieter. It was the part of me that had built things from nothing for 38 years. The part that knew how to look at a damaged structure and decide clearly, can this be repaired or does it need to come down? That kind of clear-eyed thinking. The refusal to lie to yourself about what you're looking at. That's what keeps a man standing when everything he built turns out to be less solid than he thought. I called my attorney from a hospital bed. I documented. I organized. I thought carefully about every decision before I made it. People ask me sometimes how I had the presence of mind to do all of that while recovering from open heart surgery. I tell them, I'd been making careful decisions for 63 years. The surgery didn't change that. If anything, it clarified it. The hardest part wasn't the divorce. It wasn't the money, or the legal process, or even the silence from my daughter during those months. The hardest part was letting go of the version of my life I believed in, the one where 40 years of showing up meant something reciprocal, where the people you love show up back. That grief is real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But grief is also honest, and honesty is where you have to start if you want to build anything that actually holds. I live on 2 acres outside of Maryville now. I fix the floors myself. I sleep well. My dog doesn't leave my side. What I know is this. A man's character is measured not by what he does when it's easy, but by what he does when he's alone on a kitchen floor at 63 and nobody's coming. You get up, you think clearly, you do what needs to be done, and then, slowly, you build something real. Something that doesn't need to be patched. Because this time, you built it right.